Welcome to the Writer Reads Peace Flower, a fantasy short story. This is part 1 of 3. Shoru fell amidst the fighting. Her basket flew from her hand and disappeared beneath booted feet and metal-shod hooves. The peonies were trampled, and the scent of crushed herbs mingled with the smell of blood. She knew better than to scramble after them and curled against the step that made her stumble. Someone leapt over her, using her back to reach the doorway. She heard the jingle of spurs as they passed. Swords clashed above her, and another set of boots danced their way through the measured steps of a swordsman's shuffle. Shoru had no choice but to stay where she was until the fight was over. "Death to all invaders!" the one upon the step yelled. "And so say all of us," his opponent rumbled in reply. Shoru did not stay to ponder. The boots moved sideways, metal scraped on bone, and blood fell in a warm shower. "You've killed me." The swordsman's voice sounded suddenly young. His opponent turned away and met another attack with a savage parry. Shoru heard his answer as she ran for the corner of the building. "And so must all invaders die." Around the corner in the lee of a barricaded doorway, Shoru regretted the loss of her basket. The herbs would have to be gathered again, the peonies more so. She glanced at the sun, noting it was close to its peak. There was too little time for her to fetch another basket from her home. She glanced toward the entrance of the alley. The fighting had moved on. The rattle of hooves and clash of steel had shifted. Only sporadic echoes of its ferocity followed in its wake. The victors cleaning up. Shoru's resolve wavered. There'd be some in need of a healer. Her back ached where it had been used in place of the step. A sharply cold breeze drifted down the alley. It brought the sweetness of the peony's scent, stronger now than when they'd fallen. It reminded Shoru of the strange crimson in a few of the blossoms. Peony, bloodflower, windflower, flower of peace, of truth, of war. Skyflower, Shoru sighed. Her skirts would hold as many of the blooms as the basket had carried. They might even hold more, and she could use the magic to reach the field and return. She glanced at the alley's entrance once more and let her hands weave a spell of transportation around herself. She did not see the swordsman step into the alley after her. He was in time to see her leave, to see her fade like a desert mirage. His eyes caught the gentle dance as her fingertips stroked the air and wove the power, but all he caught was the faint scent of a woodland meadow. He nodded to himself. She would gather more then. He glanced down at the delicate bloom he held in his hand. Its petals were blood-soaked, the drying gore staining the crimson bloom a dull brown before running like a dirty river into the growing blueness of its heart. Without the blood, the flower would have matched the one trapped beneath the crystal of his brooch. He hesitated, debating whether to try and trace the girl's magic and follow her, or to stay and fight the invaders in the city. The decision was made for him, heralded by the swift steps of another opponent coming up behind him. He did not stay to ponder, but drew his sword, pivoting to follow its path as it made its strike. Another invader grunted and hit the cobbles at his feet. Riders trotted into the square, and he raised his blade toward them in salute. When they left the square, he left with them, trotting beside their leader's horse, a trampled basket containing bruised flowers and herbs slung over one arm. Shoru came into being beside a great oak. She gazed out over the field and bit her lip in dismay. The field was in ruins. Instead of the dancing blue of windflowers, the field was full of blood. Its grass lay flattened and trampled into a sea of crimson. Not a single bloom swayed to the autumn breeze. She stared in horror at the desolation, the desecration of the field, and wondered why. She could not believe it. There'd been no fighting this side of the city walls. Her father had spied no warning of troops coming. She stepped out from under the shelter of the tree and cried out as the field bedazzled her. Light flashed before her eyes, the metallic scintillation of its opal shades temporarily blinding her. Shoru stumbled for the second time that day and cursed herself for the clumsy ox she was. Sweet, sweet perfume rose to meet her. Something tickled her nose with the grass stem's lightness. She sneezed and opened her eyes. There was nothing there. No grass stems to tickle her nose, no blossoms to gift her with their scent, just the thick oozing of the blood and the dead slickness of the trampled grass. She gazed at it in wonder and rose to her feet. Again the bedazzlement struck her, taking away her sight, stinging her eyes, and sending a warning tingle of electricity across her skin. She crouched this time, keeping her eyes tightly closed. There was power in the bedazzling. She could feel it. She could almost taste the nature of its caster, sense their laughter, their mingled frustration and concern. Frustration? She forced her eyes to stay closed as something tickled her nose once more. She reached out. Concern? This was not a hostile casting, then. The bedazzlement wasn't meant for her. Her hand brushed against soft petals, and cloying sweetness rose into the air. Peonies? She almost opened her eyes in startlement, then remembered the bedazzling she'd suffered. The first had only blinded her eyes. The second had touched her. Shoru shivered, remembering the stutter of power across her skin. The third time would be worse. If this spell was her father's, or worse, her mother's work, she might find herself waking up sometime next week, next time she triggered it. The flowers. There were flowers, she was sure of it. Their petals brushed against her skin. They were all around her. She could feel them. Shrew sat and sensed. She sent out tendrils of her power and felt about the field. She felt no blood. She felt no death, no broken grass, no crushing of the blossoms. Then what am I seeing? She wondered, and almost opened her eyes once more. Seeing. That word carried all the warning she could need. Someone was protecting the field and the flowers within it. The bedazzlement was tuned to catch anyone observing the field, watching it, seeing it. Shoru reached for her scarf. There could be no room left for error. It had taken time and thought to shape the magic and draw the spell. She had no wish to trigger it a third time. The scarf was an irritation over her eyes, but it would stop them opening at the wrong time. She tied it tightly and stood. No bedazzlement, no tingle of power across her skin. She wondered what other conditions had been set to protect the blossoms, then steeled herself and drew the crystal blade at her belt. It was a light blade. Shoru had crafted it herself. She had sought and found its components and nearly drained herself of the ability to shape magic in empowering it. She felt for the first stem and slid the blade through. Nothing. A second stem fell, then a third. A fourth stem allowed itself to be sliced free. Shoru laid them on the ground beside her shoe and looped her skirt into a cradle. Unable to keep the cradle from dropping free, she tied its ends about her neck and laid the stems within it. What she would look like to anyone observing the bloodied field she did not know. She did not want to know. The hunchbacked figure in the mirage gathered the bones of the dead. The hunchbacked figure in the mirage gathered the bones of the dead into its skirts. It stripped the flesh away from each one and laid them in the cradle of its black petticoats. It would have been enough to make even the most heathen of men attack. Catania was no heathen, nor was she male, and she had been born with a sense for magic unequalled by anyone she knew. She had moved ahead of the marauding army, finding and protecting what uniqueness she could. She watched now as the young sorceress cut and plucked peony blooms with a crystal blade. For the blade alone she stayed her hand, though the rage boiled within her and the broken stems cried to her for vengeance. There was purpose in the sorceress's movements, an economy and speed that indicated need rather than disrespect, and Catania had seen how the lady had reacted to the bedazzlement. She waited until the sorceress was returning up the hill with skirts full of flowers before she approached. Shoru would have seen the movement had her eyes not been tied. She would have been stilled by awe and marvelment had she seen what approached her. Her crystal dagger lay within its sheath. Its work was done. All that remained was for her to gather the woodland herbs from beneath the bushes near the oak, and she could return. She felt the flowers cease and thought she had reached the edge of the field. Her hands reached for the blindfold about her eyes. Don't." The voice was accompanied by a hand upon her arm. Shoru let her arms relax. Now the hand felt more like a paw. A set of claws? Now she felt flowers brushing against her skirts again, and a great body pressed against her legs. The hand was a hand once more. The voice had less of a growl within it. Shoru wasn't fooled. She could hear the brittle sharpness of crystal within its gentle husk.